Hi, everyone. Welcome to our artist talk with 2027 Women to Watch artist Kate Laster. Thank you for being here today. I'm Jamie Austin, and I chair the programming committee for the San Francisco Advocacy for NMWA. And we're really exciting to be kicking off our official 2027 Women to Watch programming. We do have the exhibition, which is called Closer Reading, that will open at the CCA Campus Gallery on Wednesday, September 2nd. So please save that date for our member reception. And that will feature work by all three of our 2027 Women to Watch artists, Macy Chadwick, Kate Laster, and Vivian Sming. But today we are focusing on work by Kate Laster, and Kate will be sharing an artist talk with us. So I would like to invite our 2027 Women to Watch curator, Anthea Black, to introduce Kate.
Thank you so much, Jamie. My name is Anthea Black. I was honored to be selected as the curator of the San Francisco Advocacy Contribution to Women to Watch 2027, and I'm still honored to be doing this work. It has been so fantastic to meet all of you and work with everybody from the artists to Jamie and Lorna and all of the members, as well as the partnerships that we have with National Museum of Women in the Arts. So thank you, everybody. And I'm just delighted to introduce Kate. Um, Kate's first line of their bio says, Kate Laster's practice explores the endurance of grief and the elastic capacity of people. And I think for me, this is such an evocative and beautiful entrance into Kate's practice. Some of the things that attracted me to Kate's work for a person who I really wanted to highlight were the many different threads of Bay Area artist bookmaking that I see sort of synthesized in Kate's work. And those are a fierce commitment to DIY, to poetry, to language, to graffiti, and to community work and advocacy, activism that is comes together in this amazing aesthetic collision of the artist book form, moving across typography that's hand cut using to create stencils and using those stencils as maps, using them as matrix for spray paint and printmaking. Kate's practice is just so incredibly lively and I think represents something very important in Bay Area DIY culture. Some of the more formal elements. They received a BA at Evergreen State College and MFA in history and theory of contemporary art and studio art with the emphasis in printmaking at San Francisco Art Institute. And Kate has been active in many different arts organizations around the city, including Hospitality House and NIAD, as well as leading many independent advocacy initiatives, um, which I admire very much. Their work has been shown in many countries around the world, but with a beautiful emphasis on community building in San Francisco as well. And if you haven't read it, there's also a fantastic article, feature article. It's from a few years ago, but it gave me a lot of perspective on Kate's work that came out in Hyperallergic as a feature article about Kate's work. So I will welcome everybody and thank you, Kate, for giving us this opportunity to learn more about your practice. And I look forward to seeing everybody at the opening of the exhibition, where we'll see Kate's work, Macy's work, and Vivian's work together. And Jamie mentioned it is September 2nd. So that will be a joyous occasion. So without further ado, let's hear from Kate.
Ooh. I just have so much love. This is a really fun virtual space to share with everybody. I see some names who just like fill my heart in this chat and a bunch of you I don't know. But I want to thank Anthea so much for being an amazing curatorial contemporary voice in book arts that I just deeply look up to and like am inspired by actively. And then the most deep shout out to my cohort for this NMWA Women to Watch group, which is the incredible Macy Chadwick and Vivian Smeen, who are book artists. I just feel so moved by to be even in the same breath as folks who I am always um, somehow colliding with in really beautiful ways. And I know you're both here, and I just love you both. It's really special to be in this digital room with you and future rooms with all of this group, and then to be in, with this community. And thanks to Jamie as well. We're gonna get a little into some images and a little bit of who I am. And I'm really excited to share that with you. We're going to go in slideshow mode. We're going to move slow. I know there'll be questions at the end. Um, yeah, this is so really, really cool to just kind of say, hello, I'm Kate Laster. I'm going to be really talking about my relationship to book arts, but I'm an interdisciplinary artist, originally from Alaska. Um, and like the things that kind of pull into my work, into book arts, pull into everywhere. Book making is just this really strong vehicle into who I am. Okay, and I'm hoping this slide shows up. Just that's not just my name, and I'm not just talking in a void. Okay, great. Um, I use books as a pretty wide container for my voice. My relationship to bookmaking, as Anthea so beautifully and deftly said, is often connecting to maps and to temporalness of space and kind of placemaking and viewfinding. And I like kind of showing that little clip for a bit because it shows my work in its kind of totality in setting. A lot of the things that I make uh, have this life that can be in galleries or in book fairs or many different places. But a lot of the time, it's also tied to ritual, which is sky and water and thinking about poetry in a nonlinear sense. So that's like a hint of who I am and the works that I make. And then there's maybe a fuller biographical kind of pinpoint on that map, which is how I grew up. Um, this is one of my favorite art pieces I did that's not in a medium I've ever done or committed to. This is photography I did when I was about 13. And this is in the Arctic. This is Utavik, which is the northernmost city in the United States, or what we can call Turtle Island. It's just an indigenous name. Um, I think constantly I'm thinking about place. I grew up in a really alternative family of teachers who were really into uh, close reading, which is like, again, the most humbling, wonderful thing that the show has that connection, the September 2nd show. But I grew up thinking about stories, about text, and about conversation and kind of how these things overlap. And a lot of the book work that I make involves this idea of overlapping place and overlapping text and overlapping positionality. Um, so that's where I turned 13 there. I had my bat mitzvah. Um, and then thinking back to the book form, a lot of these accordions, which the majority of the books I'm going to show today are accordion book forms. Though, I have some stragglers and some alternative books in there as well. I just love this idea again of many pages, um, being able to expand and breathe and then close and then breathe. Um, my biggest relationship to subtractive art making by drawing with a blade is really connected to this idea of what's accessible, and paper is accessible. When I was in grad school, I was doing large figurative woodcut carvings and hand printing them over 8 feet. And I had this physical energy inside of me. Um, and when you start working a full-time job, that changes. And the accessibility to paper appealed to me and connected to this part of my upbringing and my young adulthood that's tied to graffiti and making stencils and making things that are quick and fast and basically able to generate a print multiple. I love stencils because they have many lives. I'm also really fortunate enough right now to be having a solo show in beautiful Oakland, California at the Fourth Wall Gallery. Shout out to Susan. Please come check out the show. It's open Saturdays. And some of the work I'm showing in this particular slideshow is in that show right now. And I wanted to show this not only because it's not necessarily a book form, but it's a love letter to bookmaking. It's a connection of looking at how I play with letter form a lot too. I can speak from my own experience. I'm someone who's so drawn to text and language, but I'm also dyslexic. So this idea that I'm constantly going to writing and language is this interesting exercise in slowing time down so I can really spell out something because spelling is a spell. And I love language and even these stream of consciousness things, these pages that are just as much a celebration of how letters fit into each other. Um, and also playing with, again, stencil making, which can be really explorative and painterly. Um, Sometimes if you're in printmaking, the emphasis in school can be the sense that painting is like so important and isolated. But I feel like how painting blended into my work as a printmaker was constant and vice versa. Like when I'm making a painting, there's so much connection to print. And that folds into really simply books. Um, I love that my current practice right now is just as much a poetry practice. I'm drawn to consistent images of banners, kites, torn down wheat pasted posters, um, slogans chanted, sections highlighted. I'm a collector. The same way I collect images, I think of language. This is probably one of the smallest books I have. In the upcoming CCA show, there's a much bigger version of this book. And I like, again, expanding. I don't play the accordion, but someday it's going to happen because I'm just so drawn to these books. I'm so drawn to accordion books. And I wanted to sneak this in because I think book practice is so expansive and even within book arts, and I'm sure this is true with Macy and Vivian, there's a lot of variance in our own voice. It's not like every book we make is the same. And that's true for Anthea. And I believe my dear friend Nagash is in the chat too. There's a small portrait of him here in this book series. I wanted to talk about this because this project, I even list it as ongoing. This is small, tiny lino cut prints pasted in an expired passport, my own. And every portrait of a person in this book has a story of migration. And the idea to me of making these small portraits is I could print them slowly and give them to people. And then you, as an access point, have to carry that person with you. Because really, when you look at these objects, they have so much power and they're so small and they're almost beautiful if they weren't objects of acceptance or denial. And that's a part of my book practice too, is I examine that books, like the things that I love, are so everyday. They are truly an object that lives in our lives consistently. They do amazing acts of imagination for people, literacy, comparison, learning, and they can also be rigid. And so, as an active agent in books, I love kind of subverting them or reappraising them. And that's, part of my practice as well, is thinking about people through objects. Um, I really also love laminators. I just have to be really transparent. Um, a huge part of my identity, I believe, is the idea that memory is transformational. As an artist, I think not only do we revisit the site of our own personhood over and over again, but art objects change and transform. And what about if through that process of being a book, there's more about what it is as a whole, not the singular page, and transparent books really allow that depth. And they create this really interesting material of the Anthropocene, if you will, or office supplies. Um, and I'm using a lot of like my own paper cuts. These are remnants from my small plates from center of the book, which I really love to do. But these were just, I had never used kind of a digital laser cut. I'm very Luddite in many ways, but I was so taken with the scraps of my work kind of as these misprints. And so folding them into with many of my other paper cut scraps, I loved the idea of laminating them and giving them almost a bouquet. And I think about scraps a lot because I'm doing a negative art form. Not negative as in a downer, but negative by subtracting. Paper cut is a subtractive art form. I cut away to reveal the truth of the piece. Um, this is also, I've joked sometimes my work is also like a book artist's nightmare. My love of laminated work is also because it's waterproof. Um, the idea of work being on water, I understandably it's not archival or it's so different to the idea of paper and porousness. This is in accordion book form, that's cut on plastic and has the spray components, creating this really nice colorway. And often, I spend a short time almost gleaning the image on the water and thinking about how the water and the waves subtly read a text, suspending it. And I think a lot of that's my upbringing, not just in uh, rural Arctic Alaska, but I grew up all over the state. The longest I've lived anywhere until recently, until the Bay, was Juneau, Alaska, Southeast Alaska, which is a land of mountains and water and fog. And these things just continue to move me. And I think about how the personal, the radical, the political fits in nature. They're not separate from each other. And I really just love, again, that the bottom of this says its title, which is Your Heart is Not a Plaything. I think about that a lot. Moving the work outside of, I think that's Point Richmond, where I dunked that last piece, which will be on view at CCA. This is an example of my work in a more institutional space at the Museum of Art and Architecture and Design, UC Santa Barbara, curated by another friend and bookmaker, Alex Lucas. I really like how these spaces change the work and the aura of the object. In fact, these pieces read, I think differently, but also the book changes when you read it at a different point in your life. Have you had that experience? I have. And especially with art making, it just keeps layering itself over and over again. And I'm excited to see what else has changed. Um, this is a really recent paper cut, and I wanted to weave within this work that's in the Fourth Wall show. It's open until September 5th. We're going to have an artist talk August 15th. And this piece is really personal, but it's a quotation. And I think as writers or researchers or livers of life, there's always those quotes or those feelings that are so resonant. I kind of have to hold them in my hand and through carving, move through them. A lot of the work I talk about is not just intimate personal grief. I was really, really close with my dad. I continue to be even after he's passed away, but also geopolitical grief, betrayal of all of the things that are happening in the world, and how those, again, have this really strong tethering connection. And so this Lawn Accordion book, it's has this really strong life in the world and with the sky between it. Um, the work at Morning Pages and also like expanding my career or at the beginning of it is this idea of absence. I'm sculpting a lot with absence. The work has emptiness as its legibility. Um, this is another fun example of a skybook. That's often what I call them. Um, this was right after the 2022 book fair, which I just did the most recent one now, and I was so tired, and I'm so tired now. But another book that's a love letter to bookmaking and writing. Let the margins fill with text. Um, and I mean, this is a more straightforward poem, but a lot of the time I like that these texts could be read at any entry point. And then again, take time to read. My dear friend Steph, who often documents this work, always they're like, why did for a really long time you self-laminate everything? And I think I'm just drawn to the idea of scrappiness and the idea of like almost waxing a piece of paper that has a map on it. Like I think safety manuals for planes are beautiful. I want to be ready to go. And I love the idea of this beautiful book shape, book form being kind of sturdy for emergency. In fact, I think about that a lot. Um, and in a lot of just honesty, there's so much on my mind. I thought about how every artist talk I've given is very different, and there's a lot I could share and think about and wrestle with. But so often the colander, like the filter of all of my thoughts moves through books first. And I'm really grateful to think of bookmaking this way and writing, which is like this real return of a love letter. My dad constantly had lots of plans for me. One of them was to be a stand-up comedian. One of them was to not get my MFA in art, but to get my MFA in poetry. And I think there's a pursuit of both of those in my current practice. I do. I really do. I think I'm drawn to punchline. I'm drawn to wordplay. I'm drawn to all of these things that do show up in my text, and even some irony, even some humor, and dare I say it, puns. I love puns. They get a bad rap. I wanted to show this work because this was, I believe, the first time I had the privilege of being in a show that Anthea curated. This was a show at Kalaw, the Embodied Press, and just a really beautiful install of one of my self-laminated accordion books. And at this time, I was using some unorthodox binding methods of lamination, and I've moved away from that, but there are some fun plays in here where you can see floating paper cut scraps within the negative space and more shadow play. And I really enjoy those moments that can only happen in install. Um, and we're moving like, this is all condensed. It's a tip of an artberg. You'll be able to find me and ask me questions even after the talk. But here's an example of almost my love of the internet, but also my love of art history crashing in together. Thought Daughter, which I believe is just a beautiful phrase, but it's also a wordplay on a contemporary phrase of kind of like a thought daughter, which is like a totally different thing spelled differently, kind of like a baddie. But I love this idea of I'm constantly thinking, and I have a lot of thinking pain. And then my love of Marsha P. Johnson and Leslie Feinberg, quotations on this butterfly-like kite and book. And this is a good example of using sticks or almost puppetry-like holders for my book. Um, and the history of papercut itself could be a whole talk. I'm teaching at Berkeley Art Center soon, a whole workshop, as well as Center for the Book workshops on papercut. I could go on forever. Um, but again, I think this is a really nice fixture in what I do and then how I translate it. This is a piece that's currently at Morning Pages. It's a print, right? This is the use of the book we just saw as a print form. Um, it's on a kind of thin plastic, and it has all these other paper cut components underneath it, even though the text went first. And I'm just layering, almost like I'm sign painting on a window. And I love that legibility and how it changes and transforms. Language is sticky, right? Like it's a sticky thing. Um, and I just kind of love playing with it and thinking about color. So that's really fun. There's two different, very different prints of this in the show. Um, and that's to say, a lot of my practice will always be book art. Um, I think I was talking to Jamie today. There's been so much going on. About my favorite Walter Benjamin quote, which is the work of memory collapses time. And I believe, I know, I'm seeing Anthea react, and it just makes me so happy to nerd out. But I think of that for books because they slow time down. And there's so much about how we read and what language we're reading in, and how, again, I want to kind of cut up where you enter from instead of just always reading from the right onward, and play with all of these different ways you can start or end a sentence. Because as a dyslexic person, I'm often scrambling things visually and also textually, and have to read over and over again. And I've tried throughout my life to find beauty in that, even if it's frustrating. It's detail oriented, but the sequence sometimes feels remixed. Um, a really text heavy piece that's been on my heart, on my mind for such a long time is also my relationship to diptychs, which is I believe, basically a spread. It's a form of a book that's a spread, right? This is a piece that I'm so happy that will be at CCA. One of my favorite pieces. This was made on the first Hanukkah without my dad, visiting my mom and my brother, and I made it to fit the train windows on the way back on Amtrak. And I had been like holding all of this information. And this is how, at least for me, I can always speak from my experience, how grief and feminism and survival weave together. Um, all of these things are about change and transformation, and trying to just hold some record of that transformational time. And I find a real gift in that. I find a real gift in holding on to the pieces of me that have been cut away or changed or altered, that are forever transformed. This is one of the collages, or one of the morning pages, as I like to call them, at the show in Oakland. And presents a small book form, with two literary allusions. One of the allusions being to Charlie Brown. Carrying is the coolest thing I've ever seen anyone do. And then one is David Lynch, who also recently passed away, who's a deep, important figure to me, which is, and I'm not going to do his voice, even though I would love to do his voice. Keep your eye on the donut and not the whole. And that's like a summary of my practice in so many ways. It's the paper cut, it's the donut. Um, and you know what's so special about this work is I've been able to talk to so many people about the grief that they hold for family members. I lost my dad in my 20s. Um, there's never a right time, and these things change us and alter us. And it's a gift to talk about people. So when people tell me about that, I always ask, what was your person's name? I think that's really important. Um, this is the last video I wanted to share, but this is a book I made for my dad that's currently at SF MoMA. This is one of my favorite laminate books. And it's for him and for me in many ways because it was the first time I was really playing with that overlay and the ideal setting for me, which is so sky, it's so sunset, you know, which in Jewish culture is a key time of sacredness. Um, but I loved this idea of I don't know how to say goodbye, and I'm kind of refusing in many ways to say a full goodbye. I'm saying many things, but I play with lighting gels. I play with a lot of components in that work, in that piece. And it's really, really, I think, reflective of the body of work I've been making and where I'm going. Currently, you can see morning pages. That's a bit of a jump cut, but you can see morning pages in Oakland on 25th near Telegraph. It's on view September 5th, open Saturdays, 12 to 5, first Fridays, 5 to 8, and upon appointment, hit me up. You can see this kind of collection of the salon style wall that I and my partner hung. Um, and I think one of the most beautiful things my friend said about the show overall, but about the time we're in, is all of this works about grief, but I couldn't just stop hearing the people laughing and talking. Life overlaps, and these things are not separate from our lives. And if anything, book forms are the most tangible everyday art object we connect with every day.